Hello guys, welcome to the fiction series. Today we are gonna see, what if Naruto got harem with Azula, Tylee and Mai. If you want more awesome fan fiction like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. So without wasting any time, let's get into the video. Azula, the princess of the Fire Nation, daughter of Fire Lord Azai and Lady Ursa, and firebending prodigy, found herself in quite the predicament. She had been cornered by the Avatar and his friends, as well as her older brother Zuko and Uncle Iroh, who had her surrounded ready to unleash their attacks on her. Azula saw the position she was in and frowned, as the only way she could change her situation was if one of them was slightly distracted. Her lightning bending was completely out of the question due to the fact that it took too long to produce lightning, and that her uncle can redirect lightning if she made the attempt, and only one had been able to partially make a style of lightning bending instead of the usual strike, but only he knew what to do. Her only option was for her two friends Mai and Tylee to arrive and assist her. Just as she was about to surrender, a blur leapt from behind the broken wall and landed in between a surprised Azula and her offenders. The figure seemed to be 5'10" and wore what looked like a full-bodied cloak and mask that covered the lower half of his face and the hood covering the rest. He also had a sword sheathed across his back. The cloaked figure gazed at the group for a moment to see that they looked hostile in his eyes. He then turned his head to look at the girl in the red armor, who looked to be a bit frightened at her predicament. He let out a low sigh, then turned his gaze back toward the Avatar's group. "You know, I hardly think that 6 against 1 is hardly a fair fight." Iroh, being the eldest of the group, gave the young man calculating look. He noticed the look in his opponent's eyes and knew he wasn't normal, though for some reason they looked familiar. His eyes telling the old general his adversary was someone who had seen war before. He tensed as he addressed the mysterious teen. "Young man, I suggest that get out of our way. I would rather not fight you if I can avoid it." As the figure's eyes narrowed, Iroh saw that he had just made a terrible error. "Sorry old man, but it's time for me to even the odds." Then, to their surprise, the teen suddenly dashed toward the group with incredible speed. The moment he charged at them, the 5 benders of the group attacked with the strongest bending technique they had, while Sokka, the only non-bender of the group, threw his boomerang as hard as he could toward the stranger. Azula, who had been watching as all this was happening in front of her, knew that if she was to make her escape, this was going to be her only chance. However, she felt compelled to see what was going to happen, as she felt power coming off the young stranger in waves which for some reason felt oddly familiar. As the cloaked teen charged toward them, he didn't even bother dodging the incoming attacks that were mere seconds away from his body. His eyes narrowed slightly before smirking at the group. "Shinra Tensei." Suddenly, a powerful, invisible force appeared out of nowhere, repelling the attacks back toward the benders. Aang was blasted back 10 feet from where he was standing. Sokka's boomerang hit him in the head so hard that it knocked him out. Katara was thrown back like Aang, as well as being drenched by the water she threw at the stranger. Toph had narrowly dodged her earthbending attack that was sent back toward her. Zuko and his uncle also had to dodge, but only Zuko barely did so to keep himself from getting burned to a crisp. However, Iroh got burned on his left arm and upper left chest. "Yes, I know, a little boring, but I want to get this over with." When they all got back up again except for Iroh, they saw that the mysterious cloaked figure and Azula had disappeared. As Katara went to help Iroh, she had to dodge some fur thrown by Zuko. "Get away from him," Zuko yelled. He turned toward them and entered a fighting stance. "You guys have done enough for one day." Team Avatar looked at Zuko for a moment, then at Iroh before lowering their heads and leaving the prince alone with his uncle. After getting as far from Zuko as possible, Katara looked the others over for wounds. The group had come out of the fight mostly intact, so she didn't need to do much. After his sister was finished, Sokka had let out a frustrated yell. "Aerg. Who or what the hell was that guy? Just how did he manage to beat us, Zuko and Gramps at the same time, without even trying?" Katara had looked to her brother as she shared his confusion. "I don't know, Sokka. But I think it would be in our best interest if we avoid him as much as we can," Katara said, as she was still frightened by what she had seen. "What I want to know is how he was able to use airbending. I thought Aang was the only airbender left alive." "It wasn't airbending," Aang said, while looking at the side. "I would have felt the wind shift if it was." "Wait a minute, Twinkle Toes," said Toph as she leaned in. "If what that guy did wasn't airbending, then what was it? Even your airbending has trouble standing up my earthbending." "I don't know. But I know it wasn't airbending. It was like he used some invisible force more powerful than any airbending I've ever seen." "I think Katara is right in avoiding him, especially now that he's teamed up with Azula. The guy was able to beat all of us without help, and I have a feeling we haven't seen the last of him," replied Aang. "Until I can speak to Avatar Roku. I think it's best to stay as far away from this guy as we can." Azula and the mysterious man appeared in a whirl of leaves. As soon as the stranger saw that Azula had regained her balance, he asked, "So are you okay? Those guys pretty much gave you a run for your money out there." Azula blinked a few times, but nods at the stranger's concern for her health, even if they just met. I'm fine thank you, though I must admit the moves you displayed out there were very impressive, especially when you sent all of them flying. She praised, even though she was a little jealous, she was still amazed at what he did. Never in her life has she seen a display, and from the way he carried himself, he was a seasoned fighter that was capable of handling himself against more than one opponent and keeping his cool, despite being, what she guessed by his voice, a few years older than her, and doubted if her father or uncle could face him in a one-on-one fight. Suddenly the stranger vanished and suddenly reappeared with Mai and Ty Lee with a hand on their shoulder. Mai had black hair that was tied in 2 braids going down her back and wore a dark red outfit. Ty Lee had brown hair tied in a single braided ponytail and brownish-gray eyes. She wore a light reddish-pink 2-piece outfit that showed her midriff. The 2 girls blinked in surprise, shock and confusion, wondering how he knew where they were hiding and managed to move them from their previous spot unnoticed, and Azula wondered the same thing, schooling a stunned expression. How did you, never mind. Mai, Ty Lee, this person who I have not gotten his name yet helped me earlier when the Avatar and his group cornered me. These 2 are the team who are helping me track down and capture the Avatar. Mai specializes in using throwing weapons like knives and darts, and Ty Lee here is skilled in acrobatics, hand-to-hand combat, and uses a technique that is capable of blocking a bender's kai, which prevents them from using their bending powers for a limited time. She explained. Suddenly for no reason she felt that he was smiling. Why are you smiling? Azula demanded. He sighed and answered, have you 3 truly forgotten me, my Himes? That caused them to stiffen as there was only one person who called them that, and the last time they had heard from his last letter, he was still training. Oh, it seems you have figured it out, said the stranger. He took off his cloak, then started to pull off his face mask. What was revealed was a boy shoulder-length wild spiky golden blonde hair with jaw-length bangs, framing both sides of his face with deep blue eyes and 3 whisker marks on his face. Naruto, the 3 girls yelled as they tackled him. It was Naruto Namikaze, their old childhood friend and love interest of the 3 girls. Years before Zuko had been banished, he had asked Azula's father to allow him to travel because he had a dream that it was what he was meant to do to help the Fire Nation. I had allowed it. Before he left, the 3 girls had him promised that when he got back from his training that he would marry them. He agreed and had made a vow to keep his word to marry the 3 when he came back. That had been the last they had seen of him, and only occasional letters made sure to keep them from thinking he was dead. They couldn't deny that his new look after 6 years made the 3 slightly drool and their loins slightly wet. However, business before pleasure, and Azula wanted to know exactly how strong her future husband was. Naruto, could you tell us exactly what you have learned and where were you for 6 years? The other 2 were curious as well, but Azula had beaten them to the punch. So Naruto told them. First of all, when I left, I let my dreams guide me to an ancient ruin thousands of years old. It was there I found out a secret. And thus he told the girls that he had found a hidden passageway and that he had discovered a hidden mansion. He told how he discovered that the Avatar wasn't the only one to be reincarnated and that he was reincarnated as well. He told of his past life and all of the challenges that took place and how he trained with his past self. How he had gained his past life's abilities along with his own, that he was now basically a fire-bending master and had made massive improvement in his lightning bending, considering he was the only one who could bend lightning after finding several scrolls on a style that would be perfect for lightning bending called Jaiken. Yes, the Hyuga style cause it seems to fit, except it is a little modified. And more importantly, he told that he found out a secret about how the war really started and what events led to war that he promised to tell them later. Naturally, when they heard it all, they were understandably shocked. However, Azula wasn't so easily convinced. True, she believed him, but she wanted to see for herself. Really? Then prove it. Show us your power. She folded her arms over her chest as she issued her challenge. Hearing this, Naruto chuckles and nods. Very well then, but I won't be showing all of my powers as I don't think you would be able to handle all the surprises in a single day, your brain would overload. Azula nodded her head in agreement and watched him walk a couple of feet away from the trio and stand in the middle of a field. Naruto inhales some air into his lungs and pauses for a few seconds. Fire style. Fireball. He unleashes a powerful fireball that shoots through the forest, incinerating any trees that was in its path and reduce them to ashes. The girls watched in awe and amazement as they saw the flames burn a path into the forest. Naruto stops the fire jutsu and then claps his hand together. Water style. Water dragon. He calls out and the girls watched as a vortex of water swirled around him from the thin air and then became a massive dragon that washed over the remaining flames and drenched most of the forest. Earth style. Earth flowing river. A large wave of mud flows through the ground and spreads throughout the path and then softens up the ground that was drenched in water. Lightning style. Lightning dragon. Naruto created a dragon made of pure lightning that rammed itself into a group of trees, obliterating them all. Afterwards Naruto inhales another breath of air and his chest expands even more. Great breakthrough. Naruto exhales a gust of wind so powerful that it trips the trees off the ground and sends them flying. The girls were wide-eyed and their jaws just hung open when they saw him use 5 elements. Naruto stopped and couldn't help but smirk at their reaction. So what do you girls think? Pretty cool, huh? Naruto was met with silence as his answer from the 3, as they just looked at him with nothing except awe. Naruto grinned and popped his knuckles. Now to restore a part of the forest I destroyed. Naruto got down on one knee and places his hands in a form that looked like he was praying. Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee watch as Naruto stayed in that position until they witnessed several small trees sprout from the clear path Naruto made. Wood-style secret technique. He said, and suddenly a large amount of trees sprouted and covered up the path Naruto cleared earlier and also regrew the trees that were blown away by his jutsu. After doing that, Naruto placed his hands on the ground. Wood-style. Wooden house. That was when a 2-story wooden house shot up from the ground and… So what do you think? Naruto asked as he was now sitting on the roof of the said house. The girls were silent and Azula spoke up. Amazing. This is so unreal. You really are telling the truth. She said as Naruto leaps off the roof and grins. Told ya. He said. Ty Lee on the other hand was jumping for joy and was hoping to stay in a house than sleep in the transport tonight. That was amazing, Naruto. Azula, can we rest in the house for tonight, can we please? Ty Lee begs and gave the fire princess the puppy eyes. Azula's eye twitched from the size of her friend's eyes and sighs. Yes, Ty Lee, we can stay in the house for tonight only. We have to stay on the Avatar's trail. She says while the energetic girls squealed in joy and the glumps Azula. A few hours later. It was easy for the wood clones Naruto had sent to track down their targets due to their ability to merge with the plant life around them and spy on them, with the group noticing, especially since the blind earthbender had the ability to sense irregular vibrations through the earth, and the same occurred when one of them managed to find Iroh and Zuko, with said old man currently recovering from the injuries the real Naruto inflicted on him. After watching the group, one of the clones casts the Genjutsu Temple of Nirvana around the Avatar's group along with Iroh and Zuko, who were in an abandoned shack up in a mountain terrain. Once they fell into a tranquil sleep, each of the clones approached one of the individuals and used the mind-reading technique. First he started with Aang and found out he was the Avatar, which brought a scowl to Naruto's face. He saw just how selfish Aang was with how because he was the Avatar he was the one who should decide the way the world worked. Finally he could take no more and moved on silently, promising to end the Avatar. From Katara and Sokka, he discovered that they lost their mother in a Fire Nation raid years ago and their father left to aid in the war against the Fire Nation until they found Aang and started their journey to save the world. From Toph Beifrong, he learned that she was from a noble and wealthy family in the Earth Kingdom but kept her hidden from the world due to her blindness and proclaimed her to be weak and unsuitable. After running away, she learned a different version of earthbending from the badger moles who like her were blind but were able to earthbend in a way that allowed them to see the environment in their own way and move around freely. Toph also used this ability to sneak out of the estate of her parents and join an underground earthbending fight tournament where she became known as the Blind Bandit. But Zuko and Iroh was the firstborn of late Fire Lord Aslan and Fire Lady Illa, older brother of Ozai and retired general of the Fire Nation military force, and gained the title Dragon of the West due to slaying the last dragon in his youth. He had a son named Lu Ten who died during the failed siege of Ba Sing Se and was also the first heir to the throne, everything he had already knew. Zuko was the son of Fire Lord Ozai and Princess Ursa and Azula's older brother and was also the banished prince due to Ozai exiling him from his home and wouldn't allow him to return until he captured the Avatar, and that brought rage to Naruto. Once the clones dispersed and Naruto gained this info, he was indifferent about the whole ordeal. The first was being that the current Avatar was a chronologically 113-year-old boy with little to no idea on how the real world operates and believes that since he was the Avatar, people would be expected to listen to his wisdom, which would give the teenager an ego. This reminded him of how his past relative Nagato Uzumaki or his alias Pain acted, believing that he was a god and everything he did was for the sake of everlasting peace, since the shinobi world was a cycle of hatred, greed, and destruction. Naruto theorized that this boy believed that he could bring permanent peace and if he failed to do so, then the backlash would be catastrophic and would turn out just like Nagato and Obito, only on a higher scale, since he is more in tune with his emotions and doesn't know how to suppress certain ones. This didn't sit well with him, but he couldn't just outright kill the kid despite his clone's promise, since the Avatar would be reborn into a different nation and it would take years to find the boy girl. So he settled with trying to find a way to remove the influence of the Avatar from the world so that the people themselves would have to learn how to fend for themselves and not rely on the decisions of one person. Fortunately for him, he knew the information that was needed to break their faith in the Avatar. The only way he could eliminate the Avatar is if he could figure out how to break the cycle, and thus there would be no more Avatar that would be trickier to find out. While he was pondering, the three girls had decided that they had waited long enough and that it was time they make this night that the four finally became one. They arrived at Naruto's door. They took a deep breath, then opened the door and stepped inside. Naruto saw the girls enter and closed the door and looked up to ask what they wanted when his eyes opened wide as he saw what they were wearing. Time skip. 3 days have passed since Naruto had joined Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee in their search for the Avatar, and the four had joined as one. Right now they stopped to get water and take a break. Naruto was currently doing some scouting while the girls refilled their water supply. Azula got her water pouch filled up and stood up until Naruto appeared in her line of sight, surprising them. HHHH. Azula cried out in surprise, clutching her chest while he smirked. Naruto stopped doing that. His smirk turned into a teasing smile as she gave him a heated glare. Why? It's kind of fun seeing the fearless princess of the Fire Nation nearly jump out of her skin due to me appearing out of nowhere. He said, acting smug. Mai and Ty Lee giggled from behind their friend but turned the other way when Azula glares at them and back at Naruto, who was still smirking. I am so tempted to fire lightning bolts at you right now. She muttered while he snickered. All joking aside, I found a bigger trail of the flying bison's fur and it seemed to stop at the edge of a desert that seems to go on for miles. He stated, getting wide eyes from them. Naruto, the so-called desert that goes on for miles is the Siwang Desert. It is the largest and hottest desert in the world and only those who are physically and mentally fit can travel through that place. It's also called the Desert of the Dead and there is no form of water or barely any life forms inhabiting the place. Azula explained. So it would be foolish for us to travel through there, right? Naruto asks and got nods from them. Well then I guess I'm a fool because wherever the brat's heading, I am heading as well. He said, which caused them to fall over and get back up on their feet and looked at him like he's crazy. What's wrong with you? In case you haven't noticed, but my tank won't get us through that desert due to all the sand dunes formed around the area, and there's also the sand benders and raiders that lurk through that place. The Fire Princess says frantically. Yeah, Naruto, how do you expect us to get across that god-awful place? The only way that's happening is if you have the ability to traverse through it, which I highly doubt. Mai said as she twiddled with a throwing knife. She failed to notice the smirk that formed on Naruto's face, but Azula did. My Azula started to say as Naruto walks a few feet away from them and slams his hand on the ground. Summoning jutsu. He says, and a large explosion of smoke bursts forward. When the smoke clears, a white snake with red stripes and yellow slit eyes who was twice as big as Manda appeared, coiled up. She takes a look around to adjust to her surroundings and sees Naruto, who was waving at her, and three girls with two who were wide-eyed and just stared at her. Hey Shiroi-san, it's been a while. Naruto called out and she seemed to smile and lower her head down to get a better view of him, and once she did her eyes lit up in excitement and happiness. Naruto. Said Blonde suddenly found himself being crushed to death as the massive snake wrapped her tail around him and nuzzled him with her nose. The others' sweat dropped as they took in the scene wherein tears fell down her face as she slowly crushed her summoner, who was turning purple and blue to death in happiness. After a few minutes of struggling, Naruto managed to slip out of her coils and leaps out of her grip. He desperately sucks in a large amount of air, regaining his color back, while his healing factor mended any bruised and possibly broken bones and organs, mentally thanking himself for placing a thin and strong layer of earth chakra around his body, lest he get crushed to death like last time. It's good to see you, Shiroi. He said back while the snake wiped her tears away with the tip of her tails. So how may I be of service to you, Naruto? Shiroi asked her summoner. Well, me and my new team here need safe passage through a desert not far from here. He pointed to the three girls where Ty Lee and Mai were flabbergasted at the sight before and tried rub their eyes, hoping that this was a dream. So I considered that you can easily get us through there, no problem. Naruto finished as he motioned for the girls in the back to approach him as the snake eyed the surprised and stunned girls and flicked her forked tongue. She looks back at Naruto and speaks. They are strong in their own way, Naruto-kun. A mischievous gleam formed in her eyes as she glanced at him and the three girls. So are you gonna use your clan rights and claim them as your future mates? After all, you'll need a few to keep you in check. She asks humorously, which made Naruto face fault and the other three girls blush when she said that despite they were going to be married one day and they had already slept with him. Said Blonde got up and shot an annoyed glare at Shiroi. Shiroi, now is not the time for that. He yelled while she snickered. Haha, sorry, just couldn't help it since it's so easy to get you riled up. She replied. His brow twitched in annoyance and made a mental note to get back at the Toad Chief later on and was about to speak up until Mai and Ty Lee appeared in front of him with wide eyes. How did you do that? And how can that giant snake talk? They both cried and pointed at Shiroi. Oi Mai, Ty Lee, stop yelling before I lose my hearing. Naruto said as dug his index fingers into his ears to get his hearing back while Azula shook her head. Mai and Ty Lee looked down at the ground and tints of pink appeared on their faces while Shiroi watched the scene in hidden amusement. Now then you four hop on my head and hold on. Shiroi instructed while the four of them get on top of her head. Once they sat down on her head, Ty Lee sat on his left and wrapped her arms around his arm. Mai did the same with his right arm and Azula, much to his shock, sat in his lap and wrapped her arms around his neck. That was when Shiroi spoke up. Alright you four hang on tight because I'm really fast. She said. The girls did that and that was when Shiroi zipped through the forest like a bullet while the girls' screams echo through the forest. In the middle of the desert a giant white snake was slithering through the sand with four people on top of her head. They were Naruto, Azula, Mai, Ty Lee, and Shiroi the snake summon. Naruto placed a barrier around them which kept the sand and wind out and the girls were currently enjoying the ride. This is so cool. This beats traveling in that metal tank Mai. Ty Lee says while the weapon user nods and brushes a strand of her hair back. Azula and Naruto were looking around the desert for any sign of the Avatar. Azula was looking through a handheld telescope while Naruto used his Dijutsu to see for any life forms. Azula noticed what looked like a tower-like structure not far from their location. She then taps Naruto on the shoulder and got his attention. Naruto, I see a tower right over there. Azula informed, pointing to the east. Naruto uses his special eyes to zoom into the location she pointed at and saw a tower sticking out of the middle of some sand dunes and two life forms. That's not all. There are two life forms standing outside of the tower. One's the blind earthbender and the other seems to be the flying bison. Shiroi, stop. The white snake nods her head and stops in her tracks and coils up. Why did we stop Naruto? Ty Lee asks the blonde who narrowed his eyes, focusing his attention on Toph and the bison. That girl is a sensor and power type Ty Lee. She must have the ability to sense vibrations through the ground as well as read a person's body language and since she's blind, there's a possibility her other senses are stronger than that of a normal person's, so we have to take caution with this one. He answered in a serious tone. I could block her earthbending Kai like I did to the waterbender once. Ty Lee offered, but Naruto shook his head. No, that's too risky, especially with that bison around. He'll catch your scent and alert the girl to your presence, which would put you in even greater danger. The wind current speed also makes it worse since we're not downwind and the creature will be able to pick up on our scents a lot faster. He explained. Azula took this info in and couldn't help but agree and trust Naruto's judgment on this since he has more experience with this kind of thing than she did. After thinking about it for a few minutes the Fire Princess spoke up. Then what do you propose we do then Naruto? Azula asks. Mai and Ty Lee were surprised at her question. Usually Azula prided herself in her skills and wouldn't ask for any form of help whatsoever, not even from them unless she asked for it. Naruto thinks about it for a while and the young sage did a few hand seals and from his body a wood clone formed, surprising the trio when they saw a second Naruto manifest from the original. What is that? Ty Lee stuttered out as the clone stood straight up and glances back at Naruto and the three girls. This ladies is a cloner's second manifestation of me and can be used in reconnaissance missions, espionage, or to assist me in battle. He answered. The acrobat approached the clone and pokes him a couple of times, much to the clone's irritation. Stop that. He said, causing the bubbly girl to eep and zip behind Mai while Naruto and Azula chuckle. I forgot to mention that aside from being my replica, they can also have the ability to think on their own and carry a portion of my knowledge and techniques. He informed the girls before pulling out a tri-pronged kunai with a mixture of seals on it and looks at his clone. Once the girls and I are inside the tower, I want you to keep that earthbender and the bison distracted as long as possible. How will we get into the tower Naruto? Azula wondered as he turned his gaze at the tall building. I want each of grab onto me and whatever you do, don't let go for even a second. He warned. Azula noticed the seriousness in his voice and nodded while he threw the kunai into the entrance of the tower. Mai and Ty Lee each grab an arm while Azula wrapped her arm around his waist, deliberately pushing their boobs onto his body, each keeping a firm grip on him before vanishing in a flash of yellow. Wan Shai Tong's library. In a flash of yellow, Naruto, Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee appeared before the kunai as well as in the middle of what appeared to be a large library filled with countless books. The blonde sage looked around and whistled lowly at the countless books in the place. He noticed the girls were looking at the countless books but haven't released him yet. Girls, I know I'm cute, but could you please release me? He asked with humor etched in his voice. Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee looked back at him and noticed they were still holding on to him and in an instant released him with a tint of pique forming on their cheeks, much to his amusement. I have to say I've never seen so many books in my life. Ty Lee nodded in agreement. Yeah, we didn't even have this many books in the Fire Academy. Mai on the other hand scoffs. Thank and I those days are over because studying from those books were boring. Azula was about to say something, but her eyes widened when she saw a large owl stare down at them. Mai and Ty Lee looked up as well and were wide-eyed as well. Naruto didn't look as shocked as they were and kept a calm and impassive expression. That's a big bird. He muttered as the giant owl spread its wings and descended to the ground and loomed over them. Greetings humans, what brings you to my lair? The owl questioned in a deep and otherworldly tone as he looked at them with a keen eye. Naruto steps forward with his eyes activated with a stoic and calm expression on his face. Wouldn't it be wise for the person who speaks first to give his or her name before asking for the name of the guests? Naruto replied calmly as he was eye to eye with the owl. The giant bird of prey gazed into Naruto's eyes and was surprised to sense the power flowing through them before nodding. My apologies, I am Wan Shai Tong, the spirit of knowledge, guardian of this great library, and he who knows 10,000 things. He introduced. Naruto nodded in acknowledgement as the owl introduced himself. Greetings Wan Shai Tong-san, I am Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze, reincarnation of the successor of the Rakuto Sennin or the Sage of the Six Paths, and these are my beautiful companions mates, Princess Azula of the Fire Nation, and her friends Ty Lee and Mai. He introduced with a bow. It is a pleasure to meet you all, but I'm afraid you must leave as humans have not been allowed to enter my library for centuries due to abusing the knowledge they seek for their own gain. Wang Shai Tong said, but a sly smile took form on Naruto's face. Now we both know that is not true my friend because I know the Avatar and his friends are here as well, so do we not deserve a chance to learn a bit of the vast knowledge this place holds? Naruto requested. The spirit was surprised that this young man before him was able to see through his lie so easily and looked for any form of deceit in the strange eyes he had. Very well then, I see no form of deceit in your eyes young sage, so I'll allow you and your friends to use my library and any other sources to your liking. His gaze turned fierce and his feathers bristled a bit, but know this if you betray my trust, I will not hesitate to end you or your companions. Naruto nodded in agreement. I give you my word and swear on my title, clan's honor and life that we will not abuse any of the knowledge your library holds and will take responsibility should we break your trust. He assured the owl who accepted his word and the trust laced in them. Before I allow you passage to my library do you each have anything to contribute? Azula looks through her travel bag and pulls out a scroll. I have a scroll and a journal with a scroll containing instructions on advanced firebending and lightning generation and my great-grandfather's diary. She offered the great owl who brought his right wing forward in front of scroll and book before pulling the appendage back with the items vanishing. These will make a fine addition especially the firebending scroll and history of you ancestor princess, but I advise that you follow your own path and not the one others made for you, as it will end in turmoil. He advised. The princess looked a little troubled but nods. Ty Lee stepped forward with a scroll and held it out. I offer a scroll on my Kai blocking technique that I've learned and mastered. She offered and like the others, they vanished under his wing. This is acceptable. Kai blocking is a very rare and new art, so you must be highly skilled in learning such an art. The acrobat smiles at the praise before stepping back and allowing Mai to step forward with a manual. It's not much, but I have a manual on weapons forgery for the special knives I made and one with the blueprints on the design of the projectile launchers I keep hidden under my sleeves. She offered and got a nod of acceptance from him. These will indeed make a fine addition to the weapons sector of my library, and he turned his gaze to Naruto, and what do you offer young sage? A couple of things that will interest you greatly. He pulls out one of the large scrolls on his back and places it on the ground. The owl watches with interest as Naruto unravels the scroll that had several odd containment seals on it, taps one of them. And in a puff of smoke one scroll and 3 books appear. My first contribution to you is a scroll that contains the knowledge of Fuinjutsu or sealing arts. The second is a scroll on how to use chakra as well as knowledge of one jutsu called the Shadow Clone Jutsu. Wan Shai Tong reached out and swipes the items under his wings, and they vanish. These offerings will be very interesting to read and the last contribution. Naruto had to suppress a huge grin that was threatening to escape his visage and held out a limited edition gold-covered Icha book with Uraya's signature written on the left-hand corner. This I believe you'll personally find very entertaining. He hinted, getting a curious expression from Wan Shai Tong. He takes the book in his feathered appendage and uses the other to open up the book and read the inscriptions of the pages for a little before a tint of pink appeared on his face and giggles in a manner that the girls didn't like for some odd reason. Naruto had to fight the urge to laugh out at their expression and the one from the Wan Shai Tong. Oh my, this I shall cherish greatly, he said to himself as he turned a page and continued to giggle again before stopping and looking at the group. "Enjoy the library," he said before moving backwards into the shadows with a giggle echoing around the area. Naruto shook his head in amusement that a spirit as great and wise as the owl was a pervert. The other Naruto was right, everyone was a pervert at heart no matter who they were. Azula was the first to speak up once Wan Shai Tong was gone. "Naruto, if I may ask, what was that book you gave the spirit of knowledge, and why did he giggle like that?" She questioned with a hint of her demanding tone laced in her words. Lee and Mai were also curious about the book, while Naruto was inwardly sweating bullets that they each had their gaze on him. "Trust me, the lesser you know the better," was all he said. Mai and Lee nodded in acknowledgement, but Azula didn't look too convinced and vowed to herself to find out about the contents of that book. "Now then, let's enjoy the library." "But I thought we were here to catch the Avatar, not read up on the history of the nations." Azula thought, only to receive a smirk from Naruto. "Patience, my princess, we'll get the cue ball soon enough, but it wouldn't hurt to find some knowledge that would benefit us in the future. After all, knowledge is power, and from my experience, if they're looking for a way to end this war soon, then it's possible that there will be some info in this library that will help them find a weakness in our home's defense and could spell disaster for our nation and people," he says. Azula wanted to make a remark but stopped and thought about it, since it was a possibility that the Avatars group could find such a thing in this vast library. "You do make a good point, but what can we do? You did promise the Great Spirit that we wouldn't abuse the knowledge in his library, and the one thing I never want to do is anger a spirit because that is a fate worse than death," she said. Naruto pondered on this before a smirk crossed his face. "You leave that to me, go ahead and start finding some books and scrolls that could benefit us. I'll be checking on the bald monk and his group to see what they're up to." With that, Naruto vanished in a burst of wind, leaving the girls to do their part. Planetary calendar room. From the shadows, Naruto followed Aang's energy signature into a room that looked similar to a planetarium and had to admit this was a very impressive invention. He watched Sokka turning the dial a few times in order to match the calendar and dates and hear him wanting to find out about the darkest day in Fire Nation history. He watches the symbol of the sun and moon rotate until they merge and stop in place. "Hey, what happened? Why did the sun and moon stop in place? Does this date represent the darkest day in the Fire Nation?" she asked. "SHH. Katara, don't speak so loud in front of the fox who's buddies with the owl," he whispered to his sister and saw the kitsune whimper in a dejected manner. "So I was right. They are misusing this place for this war. I think I should inform my fine feathered friend about this." He vanished in the shadows once more to find Wan Shai Tong. Different sector of the library. The animal spirit was perched on a statue, giggling quietly to himself as he was reading the 10th chapter of the masterpiece Naruto gave him. "Oh, this book keeps getting better and better. The sage's grandfather is a true artist to create something so amazing," he said to himself. Naruto appeared before the owl, crouching down slightly and stood up, only for a sweat drop to form on the back of his head as he saw the spirit's giggling form. "Okay, spirits are definitely perverts," he thought before coughing out loudly. Wan Shai Tong paused and looks up to see Naruto with an amused expression on his face, and the owl also sported a look of annoyance. "Is there a reason why you've come to interrupt my reading, young sage?" he asked with a hint of irritation in his voice. "My apologies, friend, but the reason I was searching for you is because someone is misusing the knowledge of your library." The owl's expression turned serious at what Naruto told him. "And who would dare commit such an act and use my knowledge for their own insidious gain?" he asked in a voice full of fury and coldness. "I'm afraid a member of the Avatars group by the name of Sokka is using your invention in the planetarium to find out the day the Fire Nation would be vulnerable due to a war Azula Haim's great-grandfather started and wants to use that knowledge to possibly invade the land on its weakest day," Naruto answered. Anger flashed through the spirit's eyes when Naruto informed him of this deceit. "What? How dare they, after giving their word they wouldn't violate my trust for a war, no less? They will pay for their treachery." Naruto nodded in agreement. "I agree, my friend. The use of your knowledge was a privilege. They deceived you, proving they hold no form of honor, especially the Avatar, who I believe was supposed to be honor-bound and not deceitful, and I apologize if their actions have broken what last ounce of trust you had for the human race." He apologized by giving a slight bow to the owl. "There's no need for you to apologize in their behalf, Naruto, because unlike them, you are honor-bound by your word, and for informing me of this treacherous action I am indebted to you." He thanked before his expression grew dark. "And now I must deal with the ones who have deceived me with their lies and show them why the spirit of knowledge is not one to trifle with." The owl left while Naruto went to go get his teammates. With Azula and her team. The princess and company amazed by the things they found in the knowledge spirit's archive. Azula found several books on the most advanced forms of firebending and even the ancient styles that were based more on the movements of the dragons, who were the true practitioners of the firebending arts. Mai and Ty Lee had found a few books and scrolls that ranged from special weapons, fictional novels, and even fighting styles that didn't require elemental bending that were similar to Ty Lee's Kai blocking skills. That was when Naruto appeared beside Ty Lee, causing the girl to scream out in surprise, and Mai and Azula spun around in their fighting stances, with Mai drawing two curved knives, only to see Naruto rub his numb arm due to the female acrobat jabbing his arm in several places. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, Naruto." Ty Lee apologized as he managed to get some feeling back into his right arm. "It's okay, Ty Lee, it was my fault for scaring you like that," he replied back. "Did you find them, Naruto?" Azula asked her new partner and got a nod. "Yeah, I did, and not only that, but I just found out that they discovered a day when firebenders lose their ability to bend and the nation will be at its weakest," he informed the Fire Princess. Her eyes widened since she just realized that there was only one day in every 100 years when firebenders lose their ability to bend. "The day of the Black Sun," she whispered to herself. "Pardon? It's a day when the sun and moon intertwine and those with the ability to firebend are cut off from the sun, which is the main source of our bending. My great-grandfather wrote about it in his journal, saying it was the one day where he believed that losing his ability to bend was the most drastic day in his life," Azula explained. "And if they were to invade your homeland on that day, the firebenders won't be the only ones in danger, the civilians will suffer as well, since those who will attack will more than likely want to gain their retribution through them after losing their loved ones, and that is what worries me the most," Naruto informed. Azula noted his serious expression and nodded in agreement. "So what do you propose we do?" she suggested. "Right now gather whatever scrolls and books you've wanted to take and then we'll greet the Cupol and his friends. I want to personally see if this boy is what he claims to be," Naruto answered. "So you're gonna fight the Avatar and measure his current level of strength? You don't think he'll be much of a challenge to you?" Azula asked the blonde sage. "The challenge? I wouldn't consider him to be a decent warm-up after that fight in that abandoned village, but one can never be too careful. I especially can't wait to see his world coming down and that all he knew was nothing but lies," Naruto answered. After gathering all of the scrolls and book in a large storage scroll for safekeeping, Azula and her friends gather around Naruto and they vanish in a flash of yellow and reappear in the entrance of the planetarium where they heard Sokka boasting about finding the Fur Nation's weakness. "This is great. We finally found the Fire Nation's weakness. With the solar eclipse appearing in the middle of the summer, the firebenders will be helpless and we can finally defeat the Fire Lord and pay those monsters back for what they did to us," Sokka declared with a victorious smirk on his face. Monsters, Naruto thought angrily. The real monsters were the air nomads in the Avatar, the real reasons the war started, as well as the other two nations being too stupid to listen to the truth. Suddenly a shadow hovered over the gong. They turned around and their eyes widened when they saw Wan Shai Tong staring down at them, and from the expression in his eyes he wasn't happy at all. "You humans are so predictable and are also terrible liars," the owl stated and glared at Sokka's paling form. "I take your word to heart when you said you wouldn't abuse my knowledge for violence, especially you Avatar," the giant owl said with disdain in his voice. "Please, Great Spirit, you have to understand we are doing this in the name of justice and to save the ones we love. This information will keep the rest of the innocent from being hurt." Aang tried to reason, but Wan Shai Tong wasn't hearing any of their excuses and glared darkly at the Avatar. "Your justice is nothing more than a suppression of revenge, and now I must do what I have to do, protect what I love and unleash my form of justice, which includes ending your traitorous lives," he said while he spread his wings and prepared to attack. "Hold on, Wan Shai Tong," everyone turned their attention to the approaching forms of Naruto, along with Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee, much to the group's shock and fear. "Allow me to deal with them in your stead, since you shouldn't have to stain their traitorous blood on your talons." The owl's eyes softened somewhat from Naruto's appearance, but still the fury he expressed for the Avatar and his friends were still there. "Thank you, Naruto, but my honor demands retribution for their actions against me, but you and your friends have proven that you are bound to your words and have not deceived me in any way." Sokka noticed Naruto and his eyes bug out. "You?" he cried out, pointing an accusing finger at Naruto who didn't look the least impressed. He recognized Naruto by the hair because he had been at an angle to get a good look at his face. "Yes, me for a self-proclaimed warrior, you aren't that bright," Naruto remarked, getting a peeved look from the teenager. Aang and Katara couldn't help but snicker at the jab, while Azula and her friends chuckle. Sokka glared at his sister and friend with his sister looking away and Aang giving him an apologizing look. "Sorry Sokka, but he did get you with that." Sokka said nothing and looks back at the owl. "Please, Great Spirit, you have to listen to me, that guy before you is working with the Fire Nation, the people who not only started this war but also burned a portion of your library," he said but cringes when the owl's glare intensifies, especially when he tried to point the blame at his new friends. I know who they are, but unlike you who were looking for a means for war, they came here only seeking knowledge and nothing more. This agent has called him swore an oath not to break my trust and even forfeited his life should they betray me. Aang and the others were surprised and worried because they realized that they were in big trouble and it was only getting worse. Wan Shai Tong turned to Naruto. Naruto, since they have attacked your honor in spite of their own deception, I will allow you to deal with them as you deem fit. He offered before flapping up once and landing on top of a large bookshelf. As Naruto set his gaze on the trio, Azula decided to speak up. So you all were planning on invading my homeland on the day of the eclipse, huh? Well, it would have worked if the water peasant hadn't blurted it out in the open. She stated and smirked when Sokka paled at the realization. Indeed, but what can you expect from a wanted warrior? Naruto replied while Sokka fumed at the insult to being a warrior, but was ignored as Naruto set his side on the 13-year-old monk and from his facial expression, he didn't look the least impressed. So you're the Avatar? The messiah of the people, master of the elements, and the only being on this planet the Fire Lord fears. He narrows his eyes at Aang who was looking a little unnerved. I have to say I am not impressed. Hey, you better watch what you say, buddy, because Aang is more powerful than you can ever imagine. Sokka says only for Naruto to give him a look of annoyance. I was talking to the kid with the arrow on his forehead, not some warrior wannabe who got knocked out by his own weapon. That right there caused Sokka to remain shocked and silent. I mean, really, that was just plain pathetic. I'm willing to bet that you're the village idiot, Naruto stated with a smirk on his face, infuriating Sokka, but then tapped his chin a couple of times. Actually no, because even a village idiot would know better than to throw a projectile at an assassin who can kill him without batting an eyelash, so you must be retarded. Now Sokka's face was red and steam escaped from his ears, while Katara, Azula, Ty Lee, and Mai had to hold in their laugh. Enough. Who are you and why are you with Azula? Aang asked demanded. Naruto however scoffed at the kid's demand and folded his arms. I have no reason to explain myself, especially to a child. Naruto retorted. Aang narrowed his eyes and was about to say something, but Naruto suddenly appeared in front of Aang, surprising the monk at his speed. Before he could say anything, Naruto delivers a kick into his chest and sent him flying backwards and crashing into the wall of the planetarium. The wall shook slightly from the impact and strength behind Naruto's kick and said blonde look impassive as he saw the boy's body slide down the small crater and onto the ground hard. Aang. Katara cried out and rushed to her friend's aid, as did Sokka. Wan Shai Tong witnessed the move and was impressed at Naruto's level of speed and strength behind his physical attack, as were Mai and Ty Lee. Wow, he's fast. Ty Lee says with Mai nodding in agreement. And strong. I'm just glad he's on our side. Mai commented. Aang on the other hand was in pain. Never in his life has he been hit like that. He could feel his bones rattle from the kick and was having a tough time breathing. Who did this Fire Nation monster think he is, attacking him, the Avatar? Aang, are you okay? Katara asked as she tried to help him up, as did Sokka. He used his staff and staggers back to his feet, glaring weakly at Naruto who still didn't look the least impressed. It would appear that your so-called power is highly exaggerated. Tell me, Aang, back when you and your friends had Azula cornered, what would you have done with her after she was captured and restrained? Naruto questioned. Aang, Katara, and Sokka were confused by the question, as were Azula, Mai and Ty Lee, wondering why he was asking the Avatar a question like that. We would have turned her into the Earth Kingdom as a prisoner. Why? Aang replied. A scowl formed on Naruto's face and Aang for some reason shuddered at the fierce expression on the blonde's face and unknowingly took a step back for some reason. So in other words, you would hand her over to people who despise the Fire Nation and leave her at the mercy of her interrogators? Are you as stupid as the wanted warrior over here? He questioned. Aang was unaware of the cold tone in Naruto's voice and fumed at the insult. What's the big deal? It's not like anything bad would happen to her if she was thrown in jail. He shouted only for Naruto to release a vast amount of killer intent around the room. Sokka and Katara shivered from the unknown feeling they were getting, but Aang was getting the worst of it because for some reason when he looked into Naruto's eyes, he saw a visage of himself being stabbed through the heart by a single-edged blade and broke into a cold sweat. Don't you know anything about war, you foolish, ignorant child? Naruto growled out in a tone so vicious it unnerved everyone in the room. Ty Lee however lets out a shudder as she saw the dark expression on his face. Whoa, Naruto's aura just went dark all of a sudden and it feels so scary. Ty Lee said to herself as she hugged herself. For once I have to agree. Mai said as she too felt something unsettling from Naruto, but to see the Avatar tremble before him must mean he's facing the worst of it. Azula was somewhat unnerved from the feeling she was getting and it made her want to shiver uncontrollably until it suddenly faded and everyone managed to get their bearings back. Naruto calmed himself due to noticing that his murderous intent, while focused on Aang, did spread out and scare his teammates, so he settled down. Let me give a brief history in war, kid. When an enemy or ally is captured by the opposing side, after getting interrogated for information they are, as you say, sent away to prison as POWs or prisoners of war, but not in the way you think they would. He noticed Aang was growing more confused and had to keep himself from rolling his eyes at the kid's lack of knowledge of the real world. What could be worse than jail? Aang wondered, and Naruto had to keep himself from rolling his eyes. A lot of things could happen, things that would give you nightmares and make you want to kill yourself just to be free from the torture, and if you had succeeded in capturing Azula and handed her over to the Earth Kingdom, she would have been subjected to something worse than jail time, because if you had noticed, she not only the daughter of the man who is continuing this war and is a member of royalty, she is also female, and they tend to suffer in prison even more than the male gender do. He glanced at Katara's form and noticed her eyes widened in horror. From your female friend's expression she knows what I'm talking about. Aang glances at Katara only to see fear etched in her eyes and her body to tremble at what Naruto was implying. Katara, what is he talking about? He asked a female waterbender, but Naruto spoke up again. This is gonna be short and simple for even you to understand, monk. If your friend Katara was captured and sent off to a prison, she would have been subjected to being raped on a daily basis by both male prisoners who haven't laid eyes on a female for Kami knows how long, or even by the guards for entertainment. Aang was horrified beyond belief at what he just said. Ailee covered her mouth as a gasp escaped, and Mai was just downright terrified. If that could happen to her, then what do you think Azula would be fated to in a prison full of people who'd want to get retributions for the wrongs her family committed? Azula looked away and closed her eyes in fear of being captured and going through something so horrendous if she was caught by the enemy. But that can't be true, they would never, Aang stammered out as he tried to deny the things Naruto said. After all, he was the Avatar, and if he said that it wouldn't happen, then it wouldn't happen, right? Only to be on the receiving end of a glare so fierce and dark, he almost lost all of his composure. Fool. Did spending the last 100 years in ice make you brain dead? He snapped, causing the young monk to flinch from the sharp tone in his voice. The world you live in is nothing but a fantasy. This is the real world, kid. In the real world things like that happen. He paused for a minute and then his expression became dark. And in the real world you can't save everybody no matter how strong you are. Aang looked down at the floor and pondered on what Naruto said until something small whizzed past him and hit the wall with a thud, and Katara crying out in shock and pain, causing Aang to snap out of his stupor and turn around to see Katara staring at the rip on the sleeve of her shoulder and notice a red spot forming around the cut. The waterbender grips her shoulder for a few seconds, pulls her arm away and stares at the blood, her blood in the palm of her hand, and trembled. Aang noticed a shuriken embedded in the wall behind Katara and spun around glaring at Naruto. Why did you attack her for? She did nothing to you. He shouted. Naruto on the other hand looked impassive when he threw the shuriken at Katara and hit her on the shoulder. And? I'm the enemy and I'll use any advantage I can to get you, and that includes attacking your friends. Aang clenches his fists and grits his teeth in anger that the person before him would stoop so low as to attack bystanders, especially if they were his friends. Why are you doing this? Sokka and Katara noticed a faint glow on Aang's arrow tattoo on his head, as did Naruto, who smirked inwardly. He's almost there, just a little push, and then we'll see just how powerful the Avatar really is. Naruto thought as the faint glow started to get more noticeable. I am doing this because people rely on this Avatar like he's some sort of god who can solve everyone's problems, fight their battles and bring everlasting peace. He spat the word peace out like it was something vile. But look what happened, you ran away and remained hidden for the past 100 years, while countless innocent people suffered from the destruction this war caused, while wondering where their savior was and why he hasn't done anything to end the war. Also, it is ironic because while the Earth Kingdom and the Water Tribes think of the Airbenders as the first casualty of this war, when in fact they were the ones who helped this war start. Aang's eyes widened as the glow started to die down at what the blonde said. What are you saying? The Fire Nation was the one to strike first with no provocation? The air nomads had done nothing to the Fire Nation, Aang cried out. You foolish child, yelled Naruto. Don't talk about what you don't understand, considering the fact the Fire Nation destroyed the air nomads to protect the Fire Nation's continued existence. At that everyone just stopped breathing. Naruto took a deep breath and continued. What I am going to say is the truth, but for that I will have to go back to 55 BSC. In that year Avatar Roku got married with Fire Lord Sozin as his best man after he had come back as a fully realized Avatar. After the wedding he borrowed Roku for a few minutes. This was where Sozin unveiled a plan to help bring the nations together. He proposed to have trade done between the nations. But there wouldn't be just 4 nations, but one kingdom, a world where people could live together, in peace. No more would there be separation, but unification. Now Roku was horrified at the thought of the nations becoming one, and without even considering the possibilities he shut down the conversation without listening to anything, or any of the possibilities. 17 years passed after that argument, and Sozin had gotten the permission from the Earth King to start the trade to see if it would work. There were 25 guards, which included both benders and non-benders, with 75 tradesmen, repairmen, cooks, whatever. Now coincidentally Roku had been heading there as well. When he got there he saw the symbol of the Fire Nation next to the Earth Kingdom, one with smoke coming from the walls. One Earth Kingdom man was messing with a Fire Nation item and had caused it to explode, injuring several people. When he arrived just as Earth Kingdom citizens told him it was an accident, he turned on his kin and slaughtered 95 of them. At this, Aang's group gasped in shock. He then destroyed their supplies and ordered them to get out. They did, and just as they got out of the city they sent a messenger bird ahead of them saying what had happened. Needless to say, Sozin was angry when he got the message. When Roku confronted Sozin he tried to lay false accusations against him. When Sozin refuted him and told him that he would be punished for murder, Roku just scoffed and said that those lives were on Sozin's hands because he didn't bow to the Avatar's demands. He then turned away, which caused Sozin to grow angry. Here was this murderer saying that he was responsible for their deaths, launched fire at the Avatar. The ensuing fight destroyed the palace and ended with Roku's victory. He then warned Sozin if he didn't stop it would result in his permanent end. 25 years after that battle there was a massive eruption on Roku's home island. The only ones who lived on that island were the ones who still followed the Avatar, as over 99% of the Fire Nation hated him. Sozin went there only because this was the biggest eruption to date and it could have affected the mainland. He, along with Roku, managed to calm down the lava, but Roku had been exposed to too much sulfur smoke, which is toxic, and collapsed. He saw his old friend standing there on his dragon and pleaded for help. However, Sozin was indifferent to Roku's plea and said why should he help him when he slaughtered so many innocents. So Sozin left Roku to be buried within volcanic ash. After that they kept an eye on the air nomads, considering they had a habit to think they were right and the barbaric unenlightened should be put in their place. Eventually Sozin learned that there was a new Avatar. However, with this news one of the monks had sent a secret message to Sozin telling of a plot to basically destroy the Fire Nation. Apparently most of the elder monks felt the Fire Nation should be punished for challenging the status quo. There were plans to basically turn the Avatar into a weapon to destroy most of the Fire Nation. So on the day of the comet, when firebenders were at their peak, the same monk helped cause a ruckus, and on that day many lives were lost, including the monk who you should know by the name of Gyatso. This caused Aang's eyes to widen at his shock. On that day Fire Nation soldiers captured all 4 temples, with the death toll being only a few. The plan was to only capture them and have the elders face trial, however it didn't work that way as planned. A few of the elders on all of the temples escaped and used advanced airbending techniques to surround the entire temples and basically cut off all air to the lungs, thus led to the end of the air nomads. From baby to elder, innocent to not. Now you may wonder exactly how I know all of these details. Well, the truth is I saw it happening. There was a loud what? It is true the Avatar isn't the only one who is reincarnated, and my spirit saw the corruption of the Avatar and the air nomads. Did you really think that only the Avatar was capable of reincarnation of their spirit? You truly are pathetic. I wonder how it feels, now knowing that your order was the cause of this 100-year war that has killed so many. The fault for them all lies on the Avatar's shoulders as well as the air nomads. Aang couldn't take the verbal assault and the arrows on his arms and head, as well as his eyes glowed white and he looked up at in fury, while said blonde remained calm and focused. Katara and Sokka saw Aang go into the Avatar state and looks of hope appeared in their eyes. Sokka grinned triumphantly. Alright, the Avatar state. Now you're gonna get a tough guy. Sokka declared, knowing Aang could easily take this guy down with only one attack. Apparently he didn't hear what Naruto was saying when he told them the truth about the war, which will cost him later. Naruto ignored him and kept his gaze on Aang. The powerful wind current blew around the library and books and other objects were floating and twisting around the cyclone sphere Aang created. Naruto's hair and coat blew back from the powerful gust, but his facial expression remained the same. Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee were protecting their faces from the debris flying past them, but they managed to look on in wonder of Aang's Avatar state, having never seen it before, and watched as Naruto prepared to fight the Avatar at his strongest and show everyone what he was capable of. So this is the legendary Avatar state I've heard so much about. This should be interesting. Naruto leaps back and starts to gather chakra around his form. Everyone watches as the energy shifts from blue to a gold color until a flash of light coated the entire area for a few seconds before dying down. The spectators as well as Avatar Aang were surprised to see Naruto's body shrouded in a golden aura that flowed off of him in a flame-like pattern with a series of seals and designs that looked like spirals on his shoulder, torso, and hands. His first-tailed beast mode light up the once darkened room, showing his new form. His eyes were no longer deep blue, but were now golden colored with a slit pupil in both of his ocular organs, and he looked back at the stunned Avatar with a cold expression. Now let's see what you can do, boy. He challenged. The battle between the Avatar and Rakuto Sennin was pretty much one-sided with Naruto having the advantage. Naruto was easily evading a series of air blasts that missed him and destroyed most of the bookshelves and walls of the building. Just as he evaded another blast and landed onto a bookshelf, he froze due to gaining the memories the Moku Bunshin he had fight off and cursed as he was hit by a powerful air blast that sends him skidding backwards and stops before he nearly falls over the edge. Sokka whoops in joy as he saw the blonde get hit by one of the air blasts. "Alright, nice shot, Aang." Sokka cheered and grinned arrogantly at Azula and her friends. "Looks like your friend isn't gonna last long, ladies." He mocked, but they ignored him and continued to watch the fight. Naruto vanished in a flash of yellow as an air wave destroyed another section of the library. "Not bad, kid, but your control needs work." He inhales some air into his mouth and his chest expands as he adds a large amount of wind chakra into his lungs. Wind release. Great breakthrough. He releases a powerful wind blast that heads straight for Avatar Aang, who increases the size of his wind barrier, but the force from the attack was so great that it sends him sailing backwards. "Aang." Katara cried out as she saw the last hope of the world, though she wouldn't admit it. She wondered if the handsome sun hair-colored man was right, crash into the pillar that was collapsing, and while Naruto stood in his spot with his arms folded sporting a bored expression on his face, no, the boy wasn't dead due to sensing his negative emotions. "Dead up, boy, I know that attack didn't finish you off yet." He calls out and his answer was a giant fireball erupting from the pillar and expanding as it sailed across the room and towards Naruto. He sighs in annoyance of the straightforward attack and rears his head back. Water release. Water wall. He expels a large quantity of water from his mouth and rises in front of him. When the fireball makes contact, the colliding elements turn into steam until it clears out of the way. "Let me show you a real fire attack." Fire release. Great fire destruction. He takes a deep breath and unleashes a massive stream of white fire that incinerated everything in its path. Aang's eyes widened and knew even in his avatar state Real would die if he was hit by a fire blast of that magnitude and used airbending to hover over the wave. The heat from the technique caused the damaged section of the library to not only be reduced into ashes, but became even hotter than the heat outside the desert. "Wow, now that is hot." Ty Lee commented as she felt the heat from the attack with Mai and Azula agreeing. As the ground from beneath them shook, several large amounts of debris hit the ground, causing Sokka to cry out. "Ah. If this keeps up, they'll bury us in the library." Naruto was about to make another move, but stops and inspects his surrounding, noticing the place really was falling apart and cursed inwardly as he allowed himself get caught up in the fight between him and the Avatar. "Damn it, if this continues the girls will get hurt, I'll have to end this now." He deactivates the chakra mode and returns to his normal form as Aang hovered over him. "Sorry kid, but the fun's over. Well, your form is powerful, you lack the control to use it properly and are just throwing random attacks at me and causing unneeded damage, and had this been a populated area, countless people would have been injured or killed." The Avatar narrows his eyes at Naruto, who showed no fear of him overall. "I'm rather disappointed since I was only using less than a tenth of my strength as a test, and if I wanted to kill you, you would already be dead." "Silence. What you have done is unforgivable," said the Avatar as he sounded like he was talking as one with many other voices. "You side with the Fire Lord whose family has caused nothing but imbalance in this world, and now you will pay with your life." The girl's eyes widened in horror when the boy stated that he would kill Naruto and were about to tell him to run, but stopped when they saw Naruto remain calm and just stood there, not the least bit affected by the threat of the monk threatening to kill him, and scoffs. "Spare me the death threats, kid, unless you've got the power to back them up," and unfortunately for you, he activates the Jai Ubigan, brings his right arm up and aims his palm at the monk. "You don't, Shinra Tensei." The Avatar didn't get the chance to strike due to being hit by the powerful invisible force and went sailing across the room like a bullet, crashing through several bookcases and hitting a wall hard enough to knock him out of the Avatar state and render him unconscious. Katara and Sokka quickly ran to the location Aang landed in, while Naruto shook his head in disappointment. Unknowingly, a large piece of ceiling cracked around until it was loose and fell down to where Azula, Mai, and Ty Lee were. A small piece of rubble landed beside Ty Lee, who noticed it and looks up, only to scream as the large piece of debris descended. Azula looked up as did Mai, and their eyes widened in fear, knowing that they couldn't outrun a piece of debris of that size. Naruto appears in front of them and brings his hand up, firing a small blast of gravity that reduces it into dust. "Are you girls alright?" he asked, and his answer was Ty Lee glumping him and almost made him lose his footing. "Yeah, we're good." Mai complied as she dusted off her clothes, but sweat dropped when she saw Ty Lee rub her head against his chest with her arms around his waist, and it grew when she saw Azula's brow twitch at the affection the acrobat was showing to the blushing blonde. "Ty Lee, since we're fine, would you be so kind as to let Naruto go and go search for the exit?" She asked sweetly, but Naruto knew that from the strain, it wasn't a sweet gesture in any form and detected a small hint of jealousy in the princess's voice. Ty Lee was unaware, but lets Naruto go and nods happily before cartwheeling away. Okay, he looked around to see the Avatar and his friends gone and sensed them outside of the tower. Looks like they got away from us. Azula states and Naruto nods. Yeah, sorry about that time, I got too caught up in the fight and endangered you three. He apologized, but Azula shrugs it off and pats him on the shoulder. It's alright Naruto, we'll get them next time, but for now we'll head back to the entourage and rest for a bit. She assured the blonde ninja, and for some reason she looked a bit sheepish. And for what it's worth, I'm glad you're not hurt and the fight was pretty amazing. Naruto smiled as she looked away with a blush forming on her face. Yeah Naruto, you actually worried us for a while there, but it's good to see no harm come to you. Mai admitted with her arms folded, only to be on the receiving end of a one-armed hug by a grinning Naruto. Oh Mai-chan, I didn't know you were worried about little Alemi, I feel so special knowing you cared. He teased with a fox-like grin on his face, while the knife thrower blushed and averted her gaze from his, but was secretly enjoying the hug, not that she'd admit it out loud. Wait, where is our large feathered friend? I hope he didn't get caught in the attacks. Said Owl descended towards them and landed on the ground, folding his wings in place, and while he was a little ruffled, he was not harmed in the least. Fear not, I am okay. Naruto was about to speak up until a pink blur aka Ty Lee landed behind Azula. Guys, I found the exit. She said loudly, causing Aluza to jump. She lost her balance and tripped towards Naruto and Mai, trying to grab them both to regain her footing, but ended up dragging them down and into a mess of tangled bodies. The two girls groaned and shook their heads only to hear muffling noises underneath them. They looked down to see Naruto under them and their breasts smothering his face while he was waving his arms around frantically. Their faces turned scarlet and they instantly jump off the blonde who sat up gasping for air. Okami, I thought I was gonna die. He cried as he regained some color back on his face until he had his sight on Azula and Mai, who had their backs turned to him, scarlet-faced and covering their chests with their arms. Naruto's face heated from what happened earlier. Ty Lee was giggling and Wan Shai Tong chuckles at his new friend's reaction. I think I'm gonna go check to make sure that the exit is clear. Oh, and sorry about the damage to the library. It's alright, most of the things in those sectors were greatly worn out and my servants will fix the place up. Now if you'll excuse me, I have a book to get back to reading. When he vanished into the shadows, Naruto's brow twitched when he heard the spirit giggle perversely and muttered, "Hero spirit. Ty Lee, come on, we're gonna check to see if the coast is clear." She nodded happily and joined with Naruto, leaving Azula and Mai by themselves. See? I found it, Naruto. Ty Lee says, pointing towards the window where they had entered through and smiled brightly. Naruto smiled back in approval and at Ty Lee's bubbly enthusiasm. Yes, I can see that, good job Ty Lee. She blushed a little from the compliment he gave her and realized that the exit was very high. She may be an accomplished acrobat, but to scale something that high would be difficult even for her. The only problem is how do we get up there? Any idea, Naruto? Ty Lee asked, unaware of the smile forming on his face until she found herself getting scooped up in his arms and held in bridal fashion. Yeek. Naruto, what are you? She didn't get to finish her sentence due to Naruto leaping extremely high into the air and much to her surprise and shock, was clinging to the wall via his feet before hopping off and jumping even higher, continuing to hop left and right simultaneously. To say Ty Lee was shocked was an understatement. She knew Naruto's athletic abilities were amazing, but not to this level, and couldn't help but inwardly admit that his moves made her feel like an amateur, even though she's been working on improving her agility, flexibility, and reflexes since the day she could walk, though she seemed better at being flexible, like when she did a few flips and then did the splits and impaled herself on his beat, causing her to scream in pleasure. Just the thought of that night made her a little wet. The duo landed gently on the windowsill, taking in the sight of the desert outside until Naruto sets her down beside him, knowing she could keep her balance without his assistance. She was about to ask him something, but paused as she heard arguing, as did Naruto. They both looked down to see Aang arguing with Toph about Appa. Just admitted Toph. You let those sandbenders take Appa away on purpose. The airbender accused. Toph, however, was put off by the accusation and sported a pissed-off expression at being blamed for losing the flying bison. For the last time, Aang, I didn't let them take Appa. I was trying to keep that Naruto guy we fought in that abandoned village and some giant snake from burying us in the sand, and then I passed out from exhaustion. She exclaimed, but this only made Aang scowl at her. Now I know you're lying, Toph, because I was fighting him in the library and there's no way he can be in more than one place. Naruto snorted softly, especially since the monk didn't know about his replication techniques. Just admitted. You let them take Appa because you never liked him in the first place. He was inches apart from her face even though she was a few inches taller than him. Toph's brow twitched as she sensed him in her space and didn't like it. First of all, little boy, she brought her hands up and roughly shoved him back, making him stumble and fall on his butt, mainly because she was physically stronger than him body-wise. Get out of my face, or I'll bury you neck deep in the sand and let the desert ants feast on that chrome dome you call a head. Secondly, I was out here fighting Naruto and a giant snake, so don't call me a liar, and lastly, I'm blind. Toph waved her hand in front of her face, emphasizing her disability. I can only see people using my feet, and the sand around us makes it difficult for me to pinpoint others unless I can recognize their voice. The angry nomad scowled and got back up. You know what, Toph? Ever since you joined us, you've been nothing but trouble. You're always making rude comments, complaining, and being pushy. You may be the self-proclaimed greatest earthbender in the world, but what good are you if you couldn't even be a proper lookout for us when we needed you the most, huh? Toph was stunned at the verbal attack, as were Katara and Sokka, and Long said something he would regret. Why don't you do us a favor and get lost, or better yet go back to that prison you call a home? Everyone remained silent when Aang said that, but to Toph, those words hit harder than any other physical attack and hung her head. Katara snapped out of it and gave the 13-year-old a look of disapproval. Aang, that was totally uncalled for. I know you're upset about losing Appa, but that doesn't mean you can blame Toph. She chastised. Aang glares at her. Shut up, Katara, I'm the Avatar, so when I say she let them take Appa, then she did. He was about to speak more, but then realized that the sand underneath them was shaking violently, courtesy of Toph. She was squeezing her fist to the point where her knuckles were white and was biting her lower lip with her eyes clenched shut. She lets out a scream laced with fury and rage, bringing her arms back. She stomps the soft sand hard with her right foot and throws her arms forward, unleashing a blast of sand which bypassed Sokka and Momo, the first of the two being unconscious, and struck Aang directly in the chest, causing him to fly backwards and crash into the sand hard. Leaving Katara speechless but also proud, seeing as she was about to whip Aang for daring to say that just because he was the Avatar, that he was the only one right. Toph was sporting a furious expression on her face as she glared in Aang's direction, while the monk groans in pain. Fine, jackass, if that's the way you feel, then we're done, because I'm not gonna be a sifu to some pathetic excuse of an Avatar. I quit. She screamed before stomping off around the other side of the pillar and curls up against the edge, hugging her legs to her body and burying her face in between her knees. Katara tries to approach the earthbender, but Toph speaks up in a voice laced with anger and hurt. Just go. As she said this, Naruto and Ty Lee watched an angry Aang morph his staff into a glider. He then took all of the water that Katara had and left his three comrades to fend for themselves while he went to find Appa's trail. Naruto's blue eyes grew cold at Aang's behavior toward his friends because it reminded him of how the citizens of Konoha used to blame his past self for the loss of their loved ones when he too lost his family during the day Toby forced Kurama to attack the village before his past self had finally changed their minds. At that moment, Naruto was tempted to go after Aang and then beat him within an inch of his life for not only abandoning his comrades and verbally attacking the other who also had a sensitive past, but taking what water they had left. When Ty Lee saw Naruto's expression, she reached out and put her hand in his. Naruto's gaze met hers and noticed the look of concern and worry she was expressing. Seeing he was worrying Ty Lee, Naruto managed to calm himself by releasing a sigh and gave her hand a gentle squeeze to assure the acrobatic warrior he was okay. It's alright, Tai-chan, I'm fine, he told the acrobat and smiles when her expression brightened. He looked back down and saw the water sibling also leave to find out which direction Aang went and back at Toph, who didn't move from her spot. Tai-chan, go on back to Azula, and Mai-chan, I'm gonna go talk to Toph. She blinks a few times, but nods and hops back down the tower to meet up with Azula and Mai. The blonde sage hops off towards the dunes, using his skill in wind manipulation to lightly descend down the tower and gently lands beside Toph, who is unaware of his presence while he placed his hands in his pockets. Baldy really need to work on his temper. As soon as she heard his voice, Toph sprung up and leaps back in her fighting stance. Naruto didn't react and remained calm in his posture. Relax, Toph, I didn't come here to fight. Naruto informed her, but Toph ignored his statement and sent a small wave of sand at him, but he vanishes and appears to her left. Yeah, well, too bad, because I feel like fighting. She yelled and stomps her foot into the ground. When this happens, a large orb of sand appeared in front of her and with a motion of her hands, it morphed into a long pike which separated into many smaller ones, aimed it at Naruto's chest and threw it. Said blonde simply sidesteps to the right, infuriating Toph. The blind bender lets out a scream that contained a mixture of sadness and a little rage, but mostly sadness. She whips her arm back and creates a whip made of sand. Because of you and those fire chicks, I lost the only friends I had in this world, and now I have to go back to that prison that used to be my home. She cried while a stream of tears fell from her face due to the memories she had of her life of solitude. You're not as alone as you think. He said, shoe shining away as a panting and exhausting Katara caught up. It was obvious considering her background the hot sands of the desert were getting to her. Living in the frozen climate of the water tribe all her life, the sun was particularly hell for her. Sugar Queen. Why are you here? Did you come to blame me as well? No Toph, Aang was wrong. I know you did everything you could, she said, then let out a gasp and moved into a fighting position upon seeing Naruto. I think we both know you're no match for me. I could kill you both without much effort, so how about we talk? After all, you might want to save your energy. Since from what I've heard, sand benders are bandits, who's to say they won't hesitate to kidnap young girls and sell them on the market. That particular statement sent a shiver down their spines, so the girls relented. So talk. Toph barked out, still pretty pissed from the situation. Toph-chan, you seemed to react rather angrily when the monk told you to go home. I'm curious as to the reason why. Toph lowered her hands a little, as did Katara. Because it was more like a prison than a home. Toph said as memories of her life started to come to the forefront of her mind. I was born blind, and because of that my parents have treated me as a helpless child. Nearly every moment of my life they have kept me under the scrutiny of guards, teachers, or anyone on their peril. No matter where I went, I lacked privacy. I could hardly recall a time I was given a chance to leave the compound, let alone explore the outside world around me. I was never even allowed into the city. Do you have any idea what it is like to be in a place that you feel that you don't have any freedom of your own? She then explained how she learned earthbending up to how she met the rest of the gang. A child from noble blood growing up as a tomboy. It appears you and I have a lot of common. As I am a child of noble blood and your struggles sound like a lot of what my mother went through. He said, gaining her interest. You're of noble blood as well. Well, which of the 4 nations do you descend from? I'm afraid I'm a reincarnated spirit of a child of fire long before the creation of the Fire Nation. Do you sense any deception in my words? I heard your unique sight lets you see many things. So maybe you can see the truth as well? He asked as Toph focused intently on him. Well, Toph? Katara asked as Toph mused over what she heard for a bit. He's not lying. His heartbeat didn't become irregular at a single word. So you know you can trust me. I have something else I want to say, but there is something else I have to ask. He said as he locked eyes with the waterbender. And as for you, I can see the contempt and hatred in your eyes when I mentioned the Fire Nation and their questionable actions. Those eyes of hatred, I recognize them all too well, Katara. Wait, how do you know my name? She asked. I was watching the little event that unfolded earlier. He answered with a shrug. Oh, was all she said. Naruto let out a chuckle at her reply. I wonder if you have what it takes to conquer the hatred in your heart. Will you learn to seek forgiveness and find your light, or will you fall into darkness and let it consume you? Hatred and revenge alone as your fuel will destroy you long before you achieved your goals. You don't know what you're talking about, said Katara as she averted her eyes away from the blonde. I know more than you can possibly comprehend, replied Naruto as he closed his eyes. Remember this story, that of a man consumed by revenge. His name was Uchiha Sasuke, and his actions led to death of thousands because he couldn't let go of revenge. Many innocent people died because people were so self-absorbed in themselves and prophecies to do anything that might have been the least bit productive. His hatred of his brother, built on a foundation of lies, transformed into a hatred of people who hid the truth, which then became hatred of an entire village, unaware of the truth simply because they existed. He was willing to murder thousands of innocents who were clueless in what he thought would honor his revenge. That is what happens when you let revenge take control of your heart. It twists and perverts you into a shell of your former self. So think long and hard if this is the path you wish to follow. But the question is, what will you two do when this war is over? Toph. Will you return to that prison that was your home? Katara. Do you even know what you want to do with your life? Have you ever wondered? Has anyone ever bothered to ask either of you about your hopes and dreams? About what you want to do when this war is over? Because once this is over and you walk your separate paths, you will find yourself walking aimlessly as you drift away into the obscurity of history. As you both will be nothing more than just another bender of a generation. Toph found herself gasping lightly as Naruto touched her cheek, whipping away a solitary tear as his words struck a chord deep inside of her. The fact that once it was over she would be nobody. That once she had earned recognition, then what would she have? Nothing but loneliness to embrace as she drifted through life alone. You can join me, both of you. I can help you both find a purpose and a gift that no one else would be able to. He spoke sincerely as he turned to Katara. What about you, Katara? Do you really desire being another tribe's girl who just becomes a mother, or simply just another bender? Wouldn't you like to be able to help people? I mean really help people and make a difference. Deep down he could see both of their emotional turmoil and he felt for them. So if you two give me some time, I can give you both what you want the most. And what would that be? Toph asked as her brow raised in interest. For you, Toph, it would be the gift of eyesight. He said as Toph was stunned into silence. All her life she wondered what it would be like to see. To be able to see people, shape and colors. To be able to see how everyone else viewed the world and to finally have people stop dismissing her as a helpless little girl. And for you Katara, I could give you the chance to see your mother. He said as the girl's legs gave out from under her resulting in Naruto catching her, which flustered her a bit. Being in the hands of the stronger and taller male almost made her nearly missed what he said. "K. Could you really do it?" She asked with hopefulness in her voice as her eyes became wet with fresh tears. "Of course I wouldn't toy with you like that. I'm surprised this hasn't been brought to your attention before. Surely the Avatar could have easily done this," he said as he helped her to her feet. "And what would we have to offer in exchange? I doubt you're just doing this of your goodwill." Toph asked him, wondering just what game he was playing at. "To have you at my side." Simply at that he said as the two girls began blushing. "Okay, let me rephrase that," he said with a sheepish grin. "I meant I want you to join me and the others. Now I know you two have problems with Azula and her friends, but I'm hoping we can put an end to this war nonsense. I want to speak with the people and have them come to realize, to come and understand this is their world. Hell, I can tell you that there are even people in the Fire Nation who are probably sick of this war, even though that this war had started because of idiotic people. Wives mourning over the loss of their husbands and father tired of bearing their sons due to the madness. So many things people don't think about and just jump ahead without worrying about the result. So think about my offer and keep these with you," he said pulling out several Hirshin kunai and handed them 3 each. "What are these?" Katara asked as she looked them over. "These are called kunai," Naruto explained. "A custom-made kunai when thrown will alert me and teleport to you instantly. So if you girls ever find yourself in trouble just throw one and I'll be there to help you," he said as he pulled out a scroll and unsealed a massive jug of water. "It looks heavy, but I have a special seal on it that makes it as light as a feather. There is enough water in here to keep 10 people hydrated for months," he said as he placed down the heavy and daunting looking jug. "Naruto Uzumaki, son of Kushina Uzumaki and Minato Namikaze. Remember my name. So take care of yourselves," he said kissing Toph on the left cheek and Katara on the right. "See ya," he said disappearing in a yellow flash and leaving the blushing and somewhat aroused girls to their thoughts. Katara found herself so confused about her feelings. She didn't know what to make of Naruto. His words and how logical and sound they were. Did the people really depend on the Avatar too much? But then she thought about her grandmother tales of the Avatars and how great they were and how they were forces of good and balance. Though she shuddered as she remembered the scene in the library and how Aang in Avatar state tried to kill the blonde. And not to mention what else he said. Also there was the story he told about the start of the war. For some reason she actually started believing him. She had never really thought about what she was going to do with her life beyond helping Aang. It also left her to reevaluate her feelings on certain things. Could he really bring an end to this war if they united? It also had her questioning the emotional depth of her feelings with Aang and if she could handle falling for him and dealing with everything it entailed. Ta felt just as confused as she tried to come to terms with the offer. Being offered the ability to see and a purpose. Being able to also deal with other things she never thought about. Like having a reason to pursue a romantic relationship. It was something that never really crossed her mind until this moment. Tomboy or not, she was still a teenage girl with hormones after all, and being shown interest by a guy bolstered her self-esteem a bit. It also made her want to experience a world without war and to finally be embraced and accepted for who she was by her parents without being coddled like a child. With that in mind, Toph and Katara were considering taking up the blonde's offer. So this part ends here. Alright, that's it for today's video guys. Let me know in the comments section how was the story and also don't forget to like, share and subscribe. I will meet you in another video. Bye bye.